Hey guys, Chris from Katsukuri Media here, and in this video I wanted to discuss presets, XY switching, and scenes in the Axe-Fx 2. These functions can be used independently or together depending on the situation. Using presets, XY switching, and scenes isn't difficult, so the main point of this video is to explain the concept behind each function. Sometimes any of these three can be used to create the same result, which may be why it can be a bit confusing at first. But there are many times when one function is better than the others. This video is also a sort of history of using the Axe-Fx, since at first there were only presets in the Axe-Fx Standard and Ultra, then the Axe-Fx 2 introduced XY switching and later introduced scenes in firmware version 9. So even if you're familiar with some of the concepts, it might be nice to see how it's improved over the years. Let's take a look at presets first. Almost all digital units use presets. Presets can be thought of as a collection of parameters that are previously set. Sometimes presets are also referred to as patches, because before digital units, people would connect various analog devices together using short quarter-inch cables called patch cables. To recall a certain sound the same way again, they'd have to physically patch things the same way as before. With computers and digital memory, all of the patching was done internally, and the terms parameter set and preset became a better way to refer to the concept. So the words preset and patch mean the same exact thing. In the Axe-Fx, a preset is a particular combination of blocks with certain settings in a particular configuration. We all know that blocks are the different components for making different sounds or effects, like an amp block, which models an amp, a cab block, which simulates a guitar cabinet, a reverb block that makes it sound like your guitar is being played in a room, and so on. We also know that the layout is the 12x4 grid on which we place our blocks and connect them in different ways. So per preset, the Axe-Fx will save what blocks you placed in the layout, where the blocks are placed, and how they are connected to each other, like in series, parallel, or with diagonal connections. And of course, a preset will save the settings made within each block. Presets save a few other things like the input noise gate settings, output mixer settings, and controllers, to name a few, but the main concept here focuses on the blocks added to the layout. So let's take a look at some of the factory presets just to see exactly what's happening. Here I have a factory preset called 59 Bass Guy, and in this preset we can see a compressor block, wah block. This is a shunt. This is like a connecting cable or something. It's a blank block, but it connects the signal from this block through to that one. The next one is a drive block. Here we have our amp and cab and a few other things here. And you can see that the amp and the cab are engaged here, so is the reverb, but all these other blocks are bypassed. Chorus, flanger, these are all bypassed. Now the shunt isn't ever bypassed or engaged, it's just always there and it passes the signal through. And in this preset, the amp model used is the 59 Bass Guy. You can see it down here. So let's hear what this preset sounds like. Cool, let's check out another factory preset. This preset's called Friedman HBE, and it has a similar layout to the other one, but where there was a shunt before, in this preset it happens to have a phaser block. Again, it's also bypassed, but you can see in the previous preset there wasn't anything here, and in this preset there is. And these can be anywhere. I can move things around, and it'll save wherever these blocks are. And in this preset, the amp type is Friedman HBE, of course. So let's hear what this one sounds like. Now, since these two factory presets were so similar, let's take a look at one of my presets, my main preset actually, just to show you a little different routing. You know, those two presets had everything on row 2. Here's my preset, just a quick look. I have things on row 1, I have diagonal connections, parallel connections, these two amp blocks. I have a lot of stuff going on over here. I have a 4th row going on that connects back to the main row, and then I have this other thing here that looks weird, but I'll explain this a little bit later. But I just want to show you that presets can save all of the different blocks, exactly where they're placed in the layout, and then all the connection types and what connects to what. And of course, they all can sound different. They're all independent, they don't affect each other, and what's in this preset and how it's laid out and connected doesn't affect those other presets I just played. Now let's say we have a gig coming up and we need two different sounds, a clean tone and a lead tone. We can of course use presets to create these two different tones and then switch between them. Most digital effects and tone generation units work this way. Usually a preset is designed for a single kind of sound, and to make a different sound you usually design a different preset and switch to that preset. So let's create a quick preset and I'll make a clean tone using the front panel. So I have this blank preset here and you can see that the layout is blank. And first we'll add a row of shunts to connect the input block to the output block and get signal. Right now there's no guitar signal. So let's add some shunts here. In this preset I'm gonna start with row 2. You can use any row you want, but I'm just gonna start with row 2. So turn the value wheel till it says shunt and hit the enter button. And now a quick way to add shunts all the way across is to just hold the enter button. And it'll quickly just shunt the whole way from input to output. Now when I play, you'll probably hear a very, very quiet guitar signal, but we have successfully connected the input to the output for sound. Again, you can use any row you want as long as you make a connection from the input to the output. Okay, now I'll add a amp block. So scroll the value wheel to amp and hit enter. And we'll hit edit to get in there and choose what we want. And I actually do want the double verb amp. That's the one I want. So there it is. And we'll hit layout to get back to that screen. And we'll navigate over to another shunt here. And let's choose a cab block. Select cab and hit enter. We'll hit edit here to get into that. And let's choose like a 212 something or other. Yeah, I guess that works. 212 double verb, that's what we're going for. Hit layout to go there, and there we go. We made a simple preset with amp and cab. Let's hear what that sounds like. There we go, we have a clean tone. Now we need to store the preset, so the changes I just made will still be there when I come back. So we'll hit the store button. We'll cursor down to the name field, and let's just add a little quick name here about C for clean. That's fast enough for me. And when you're done editing that, hit enter twice. And there we go. We got our C for clean preset. Now let's create our lead preset, and I'll use Axe Edit for this. So let's increase our presets, go to the next one. It should be blank. I just happen to blank these out. Okay, and let's use row 1 this time. No particular reason, I just want to show you can do different rows, no problem, as long as there's a connection from input to output. So we'll add shunts just like before. On Axe Edit, you right click on a block and then you select the block that you want. We want a shunt block, so click that. And to make connections all the way through, you click on this out button here and you just go all the way over and click on the plus button to make connections. And there we go, we have our blank preset but with shunts, so we get signal when we play our guitar. Cool, next we'll add an amp and a cab. Now we don't need to put the amp block in the same column as the previous preset. As long as there is a connection from input to output, we can put the amp block in the first column, we can put it in one of the last columns. It doesn't matter, it'll sound the same no matter where it is and regardless of what is happening in other presets. Block placement starts to matter when it comes to using multiple blocks together for pre or post effects. And I don't want to get too much into that now, but I just want to point out that block placement by itself doesn't affect the tone. Okay, so let's choose a JCM 800 style amp and maybe a 412 cab. So let's put the amp block way over here. I'll right click here, choose amp 1, and let's go into the amp types and let's see, Brit 800, that looks good. We'll choose that, and then we need a cab block, and usually cab blocks are placed after the amp. That's a normal place for them to go. So we'll hit a cab here, and let's choose from our cabs, and I don't know, let's do a 412, this guy. And now we have our lead tone, here it is. Cool, and of course we need to store this and save it, so when we come back, all our settings are there. So let's give it a name, L for lead. Hit enter, and then hit this save button here and it'll save it to the Axe effects. So we have our two presets and we're ready to gig. Now using the front panel, Axe Edit, or a foot controller like the MFC 101, I can switch between these two presets when I want a clean tone or when I want a rhythm tone. And now you don't necessarily want to use Axe Edit live at the gig, but that's what I'll use just for this demo. What I've done so far is simulate using two separate amps, a Fender Twin and a Marshall JCM 800, with something like an AB box or channel switcher. However, most people have more experience using an amp with multiple channels, but you would approach that the same way using presets in the Axe effects. Let's say that my real two-channel amp happens to sound exactly like these two presets I just made. With the real amp, the two channels exist within that amp head or combo, but in the digital realm, different channels of the same head are just different models, and they're used one at a time. So you don't do any channel switching within the amp block itself on the Axe effects. Using presets, you just create a different preset for the different channel or tone. I do want to mention that yes, you can do something similar using two amp blocks, using only one at a time, but to illustrate the concepts more clearly, we're going to use this example and workflow. Okay, so what about Stompboxes and other effects? Well, of course we can add those to our presets. To keep things simple, for now, we're going to assume that all blocks and effects added to the layout are permanently set on, and there's no way to bypass them. So let's say in addition to our clean and lead tones, we need another type of clean tone with a chorus effect. So now we need 3 different sounds at this point, meaning we need 3 different presets. Now we really like our clean preset, and we just want to add a chorus sound to it. So let's duplicate the clean preset so everything is the same. I'll use my front panel, and I've selected my clean preset. Let's hit Store, and cursor up to location, and let's choose 12. That's another blank spot I have. And we'll hit enter twice. And there we go. Now we have an exact duplicate of that preset just in preset slot number 12. And now let's add a chorus block to this. This is our clean sound, but we're going to add a chorus block. So right click and let's choose chorus 1. And let's see what that sounds like. Cool, that sounds good. Let's give this a name like CH for chorus. Let's do that, hit enter, and then we'll hit save. But maybe we want to reorder these presets so the chorus comes after the clean tone. So I can go clean, then chorus, and then lead. So let's use our front panel swap function to do that. We'll go back to the front panel. Let's hit store, and it's originally in save mode, but we want to page over to swap, and we want to exchange presets 12 and 11. We want to swap those places, so choose 12 and 11, hit enter twice, and there we go. Now 12 is my lead tone. So let's go through these real quick. Here's my clean sound, and we'll move up one preset. Here's our chorus clean sound. Cool, and we'll go up one more, and we'll choose our lead sound. Great, and there we go. We have our 3 different sounds. Now in some digital units, this is the only way to add an effect to an existing tone. You have to duplicate that preset and then make the changes you want and then select among those different presets. But what if I want an optional chorus and delay and reverb, and sometimes I want the chorus and reverb on but not the delay, and other times I want the delay and reverb but maybe no chorus? That's a lot of combinations, which would lead to a ton of presets, one for each of the combinations I just mentioned. Well, remember earlier I said that we're going to assume that blocks added to the layout couldn't be bypassed. Well, guess what? Now they can. And generally you would do this bypassing and engaging of blocks with a foot switch while playing live. With real Stompboxes, this of course would be just like the switch or rocker pedal, turning the effect off and on. For this video, I'm just going to use Axe Edit to keep it simple. So now that we can bypass blocks, we don't need a preset for each different effect combination I just mentioned. We can have our basic clean tone, but add all of the effects we want and just engage or bypass them when we need to. So let's go to our preset that we made with the chorus. Here we go, number 11. And that'll be our new clean preset. So let's add a delay and reverb as well. So right click, add our delay, and right click and add our reverb. There it is. That might have gone off the screen, but I selected reverb there. And I'm going to bypass all the effects and just leave the amp and cab on as our basic clean tone. So in Axe Edit, you can bypass by double clicking blocks. So we'll do that, double click. You can see they go to this bypass thing where the signal goes through it, but they're not on. So here's our clean tone. We have our effect blocks in there now, but they're all bypassed. Now let's say I'm playing and I want chorus and reverb. So while I'm playing, I would step on a foot switch, or here in Axe Edit, I just double click, and chorus and reverb, turn those on, and here's what that sounds like. And let's say we're playing and now we don't want chorus, but we want delay and reverb. So I would turn off the chorus and turn on the delay and see what that sounds like. And then we want all the effects off, so let's turn off delay and reverb, and we're right back to our regular clean tone. And we did that all in one preset simply by bypassing or engaging the blocks that we want. You'd usually just do this with your effect type blocks like chorus, delay, reverb, and that sort of thing. But as you can see, I have to engage or bypass each effect individually. And when I need to turn off many things at once, it takes a bit of time to do each one. And many people refer to this as tap dancing because they are quickly hitting switches on their pedal board with their feet. If we stick with presets, there is a way to alleviate this tap dancing, and that is to use multiple presets just like before and have your different combination of effects engaged in different presets. So again, let's duplicate our main clean preset here. And let's say we want 3 total versions of this clean. A dry clean, no effects. Let's do a clean with chorus and reverb. And then let's do a clean with delay only, turning off the chorus and reverb. What allows us to set this up is the fact that a preset in the Axe effects will store the engage or bypass state of each block. So first let's duplicate this preset. Let's go to Axe Manage Presets. And we're using our number 11. What you want to do is when you click and drag your preset, you want to hold the shift key and it'll change to copy. And when you let go, it'll start copying. Now you want to wait for that to finish. Then you can click and drag again. Hold shift and let's copy there. And there we go, we made our changes. Let's hit save so we can save those duplicate presets there. I said we wanted 3 different ones, so there we go. So we want our first preset to have all effects bypassed, just leaving the amp and cab like before. So let's double click those to bypass. And let's rename this clean 1 and we'll hit save. Now let's go to our second clean preset that we duplicated here. And this one we wanted chorus and reverb only. So let's bypass our delay block and let's rename this one clean, chorus, and reverb, and let's hit save. And let's go to our third duplicated preset here, and in this one we want delay only, so let's bypass the chorus and reverb, and let's change this to clean delay. Hit enter, and we'll hit save. There we go, and now let's put this in a different order again using Axe Manage. Let's put our lead preset last. So here's our lead preset, let's just move that out of there for now. We want to go clean, then clean chorus, reverb, and then let's do clean delay, and then let's do our lead preset. So that's the order we want, and we'll hit save. So starting from preset 11, those are a new gig preset. So let's wait for this to finish, close it, and let's go to preset 11. That's our first gig ready preset. Boom. And let's just step through these real quick. Here's our clean with nothing on. And let's step up to our next preset. So there's our clean with chorus and reverb, and our final preset of the cleans here, a clean with delay. And then of course we can step up and look at our lead preset here. So you can see with just a single click, I could move through those 3 different clean presets, and they had all different combinations of effects. So presets are great for that too. Now, of course, we could do the same thing with my lead preset. We can add reverb in one preset, delay and reverb in another, or just choose to engage or bypass individual blocks that we add if I don't change them too often or all at once too many times. I'll mention quickly that something you want to do is balance the volume among all of your presets so they are the same level when you switch, or maybe you want to make one louder for a lead. I go over this concept in depth in my preset gain staging video, so check that out for details. Now those are the basics of using presets in the Axe effects. There are 384 preset slots on the Standard, Ultra, and Axe Effects 2, and some people ran out of space really quickly when using presets to create all of these small changes with tones or effects. And at the time of this video recording, the Axe Effects 2 XL has 768 preset slots available. But using presets like this still takes up a lot of space just for those little changes. With the Standard and Ultra, this duplicate preset method was the main way to create sounds. There were ways to use modifiers and link MFC 101 switches together, but on a basic level, presets were the way to go, until the Axe-Fx 2 was released with XY switching. XY switching is a feature where a single block can recall two separate sets of parameter values, and only one of these sets can be active at any time. One set is known as X, and the other is known as Y. At any time, you can switch from X to Y or Y to X to recall the values stored in each one. Blocks in the Axe-Fx 2 that have XY switching are amp, cab, chorus, delay, drive, flanger, pitch shifter, phaser, reverb, and wah blocks. The Axe-Fx 2 XL adds a few more blocks with XY functions, including the compressor, the gate expander block, graphic EQ, parametric EQ, the trem pan block, and the mixer blocks. Similar to how engaging and bypassing blocks allowed us to do more with a single preset, XY switching lets us do even more. Let's go back to our two-channel amp example, a clean tone and a lead tone. With presets, we had to create one preset for clean and another preset for lead. If we wanted reverb in our clean tone and in our lead tone, we'd have to set up two different reverb blocks, one in each preset, and make sure any changes we did to one, we did to the other if we want them to sound the same. And yes, you could use global blocks to do this, and I made a video on that, but again, we're keeping it simple to illustrate this concept. Now with XY switching, we can choose between two different amp settings within the same preset. This means all other effects and blocks will be the exact same for those two amp tones, and we can save on the number of presets used, since this one preset does the job of at least two, and even more when you consider the effects as we discussed before. So let's set up XY switching for our amp block. By default, blocks that have XY switching available start out in the X state, so it's not an option that you turn on or need to engage. XY switching is always going, and it just usually defaults to X. So everything we've done before this was all in the X state of those blocks. Here's our clean amp setting, and in the amp block on the front panel, you can see the X here, which shows we're in the X state of this block. And in Axe Edit, the block itself will show a little X here, or a Y here. My delay block happens to be in Y, but everything else is in X. You'll see it right on the block, or in the parameters below, you can see the X or Y button and see which one is selected. So again, in this preset, we want our amp1X to be our clean amp, and now we want to set our amp1Y to be our lead tone. So we need to set up our Y state, but first we have to switch to the Y state so we can get to its settings. Now on the front panel, when you're in the edit screen of an amp, what you need to do is press the Y button to get to the Y state, and you can see it just changed to Y. And to go back to X, you hit the X button in the quick control area on the front panel. So there's X and there's Y. In Axe Edit, you click this X or Y button here in the parameters section below, or you can press the X key on your keyboard, and the X key will switch both X to Y and Y to X. You don't hit your Y key or anything like that. X will switch it both times. So let's go to our Y state by clicking the Y button on the screen here. And now we're in the Y state of our amp block, and we can see identical parameters available just as before with the X setting. We can change these to do anything we want, and it doesn't affect the X setting, and nothing in the X setting affects our Y setting. They're completely independent, similar to how it doesn't matter what's in other presets when you make a new preset. So let's set up our Y state for a lead tone. So coming down here in Axe Edit, we don't want a double verb amp. Let's go back to our Friedman HBE. Let's select that. And I'll probably need to turn it down a little bit. And there we go, we pretty much did it. We have our lead tone on our Y, and we can switch back to our X for our clean tone. So let me show you that. So here in our clean preset, we're with amp 1, and we're in our X state for our clean amp sound. Here it is. And now all we need to do is switch to our Y state of our amp 1 block for our lead tone. Now again, we didn't change presets there, we just changed the X and Y state of our amp block from clean to lead. And to accomplish this live, we can set up a switch on our MFC 101 or other MIDI foot controller to change the XY state of the amp block with a button press. And we can get those different tones using the XY instead of changing presets. Again, this leaves more preset slots available since this single preset can do so many things now. I can have my clean tone and turn on delay. And then I can go back to my amp block and switch to my lead tone, the Y state of the amp block, and turn on delay and reverb if I want. Then go back to my amp block and go back to clean and have the same delay and reverb. Another way I used this when I played live is I had two similar amps selected in my X and Y, maybe a Mesa Boogie style in one and a Marshall style in the other, and then depending on the song or even the room that night, I chose the one that sounded better at the time for me. So my boogie tone would cut a little bit more versus the Marshall tone, which was a little bit wider sounding and filled the space more. So whatever I needed, I just hit my XY switch on my MFC and I chose the best one for that moment. In addition to reducing the number of presets used, XY switching can help reduce CPU usage in presets as well. Reverb blocks, for example, take up a lot of CPU. So instead of adding two reverb blocks in a preset, you can use XY switching to choose between a hall reverb and a spring reverb. Just change to the one you want, since you usually only have one reverb on at any time. A few quick notes about XY switching from the manual. XY switching is generally seamless, but the amp block requires a moment to reload when you change X and Y. It's also important to understand that modifiers are shared between X and Y states. Now some people use XY switching in every block they could at the same time, so with one button press, they could essentially change presets without actually changing to a different preset number on the axe. They would change the CC number of all of the XY switches to the same number in the I/O control menu on the front panel, and then they would assign a switch on their MFC to change all of those blocks at the same time from X to Y. Now, you may wonder why they prefer to do this rather than just change a preset. Well, there's a few answers, and one of those answers actually might be, I don't know. For many situations, changing presets is viewed as the best option for something like this, just like I showed you before. If you link all of your CC numbers to the same number, then you can never use them independently again. For some people though, this wasn't an issue and it worked out better for them to do this huge XY change. Some people said that the spillover was handled better, and that's where the delay or the reverb trails when you change sounds. Some people couldn't use preset changes due to their MIDI setup with external devices or how they set up their MFC 101. There's really a bunch of reasons why either method is better for many different situations. But a lot of times people would read about this huge XY change method and not really understand the entire concept, and instead they just made things much more difficult for themselves when they were changing CC numbers and assigning switches on the MFC, and they really got lost, and maybe making just different presets would have been the easier solution, the best way to go. Something I always remind myself when I'm creating tones for myself or setting up rigs for others is just because something can do something doesn't mean you need to do that something. Always make sure you understand the function you're trying to set up and if it's actually needed, or if a simpler method could be used with the same result. That said, it's also always good to experiment and discover something new or discover where things can be improved upon. Anyway, many people were trying to figure out new ways to use XY switching to do more within a single preset, but there was always some sort of roadblock with the available features at the time. There just had to be a better way. And that better way was scenes. Firmware version 9 in the Axe FX 2 introduced scenes, a very powerful function in the Axe that solved the problem of having to link all the XYCC numbers together, and it provided other great features as well. I wrote a blog explaining scenes when they were first released back in December 2012, but let me explain them again here. So what are scenes? Similar to how presets save what specific blocks are contained in the layout and a few other things, scenes save the engage and bypass state of the blocks in the preset, and a few other things. Remember before when we wanted to change the chorus, delay, and reverb all at the same time? Some engaging, some bypassing, and we had to do that tap dancing thing. Well, that's exactly what scenes can help us do. Instead of tap dancing on those switches, we can just use one switch by programming a scene to engage or bypass the blocks we want for different combinations of sounds. Every preset has 8 scenes, so we can have 8 different combinations of engaged and bypass blocks. And now we can do even more in a single preset, meaning we don't have to change presets, and we have many preset slots available for many more types of tones. So let's go back to our previous example. Remember, using XY blocks, we created one preset with two very different tones, a clean and a lead. We used the XY states of the amp block to do that. We also added a few effects like chorus, delay, and reverb. But now let's create a few scenes. First, a completely dry clean like before, then a clean with chorus and reverb, and then a clean with just delay. Does this sound familiar? We did this before using presets, because that was really the only way to do so. Now with scenes, we can do it all within the same preset. Similar to XY switching, there is no scenes mode. Since firmware 9, which introduced scenes, everyone has always been using at least scene 1. It's the default scene when you load a new preset. So there's nothing to turn on or anything like that. Scenes are always active. Let's set up scene 1 as our clean, dry preset. So in Axe Edit, you can see the scene number here in the scene select group here. Right now we have 1 currently selected. And on the Axe Effects front panel, in the layout screen, you can see the scene number, as well as the recall screen. You can see the scene number there. Back over to Axe Edit, our scene is actually done. We have our amp and cab with no effects on. So here we have scene 1. Now, we don't need to save immediately after setting up every scene, but it's a habit I've gotten into, and I tend to save or store the preset after I do anything I want to keep. But we can switch to different scenes and change things. Just make sure you save the preset before changing presets, or of course before powering off your Axe Effects. I don't even need to, but I'm just gonna save anyway since that's done. Boom, saved. Now to change to the next scene and adjust it, on the Axe Effects front panel, we can turn the A quick control knob to change scenes, either from the recall screen or the layout screen. You just turn the knob to increase scenes 1 by 1 or decrease scenes 1 by 1. In Axe Edit, you can directly choose the scene you want using these numbers available here. So let's switch to scene 2. New scenes always default with every block engaged. With the current block logic, that's just how it is for now, so just keep that in mind. You may want to turn down your volume when creating new scenes since all your blocks might be on. Also, if you add a new block to the layout, it will be added to all scenes as engaged. Be sure to go through your scenes and bypass it in the scenes you don't want that block to be engaged. But it's simple to create a new scene, just bypass the blocks you don't want. So this second scene we wanted chorus and reverb, so we need to bypass the delay. So we'll double click that. And again, we don't need to save, but I'm just gonna go ahead since this is what I want and save that. Now in our third scene, we wanted only delay. So let's switch to scene 3 and we need to bypass our chorus and reverb just so delay is the only thing on. And let's go ahead and save that. There we go. And there we have it. We have our 3 clean tones using scenes within a single preset. And let's hear what those sound like. So let's go to scene 1. And here is our clean tone with all the effects off, just clean. Cool, and here's scene 2 with our chorus and reverb. Sounds good, and here's scene 3 with our clean tone and just delay. Now what about that lead tone we had? Remember with XY switching, we could change the amp block from clean to lead without leaving the preset, but we had to use a button specifically for amp 1 XY switching. Well, guess what? Scenes can actually change the XY state of a block as well. So with the scene change, we can engage or bypass blocks and change the XY state of any block at the same time. So let's make our lead tone in scene 4. Hit number 4. Everything is on and in its X state. So let's change the amp from X to Y, because that's our lead amp. And I don't want chorus, so let's turn that off. I don't want reverb, but I do want delay. Let's do that. So we can save that now that that's done. And let's hear what that sounds like. And let's say we want a 5th scene, a different lead tone. So let's go to scene 5 and we'll change our amp again from X to Y. And I don't want chorus, but I don't want delay, I do want reverb. And let's save that. Let's hear what that sounds like. And there it is. With a single preset, we are now doing the work of 5 or more presets to get all of these different sounds. Let's run through those real quick. So scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4. Notice that the amp switched from X to Y. Scene 5. Sounds good. Scenes can also change the main level in the output block. So we'll click our output block here, and here's the main level. It's a slider. And on the Axe front panel, you need to go all the way over to your output block and hit edit. And here it is, that's the main slider there. So this can be used to boost or cut any scene that you want to. It's best to keep all of your scenes at 0, no boost or cut, right in the middle. And then when you want a scene to be louder, you can increase this level to the level you need for that boost. So let's make scene 2 louder than everything else, all the other cleans. For some reason we want to do that. So we'll go to scene 2 and let's increase this to, I don't know, 4 dB or so. Let's save that. And now we'll go to scene 1, and you can see that this scene, the main level is 0. And again, this level is after everything. So this is kind of like a boost. Everything gets louder or softer. So here's scene 1. And then we'll switch to scene 2 with that 4 dB boost. Yeah, it's definitely louder. So there's that. I'm gonna set it back to 0 because I actually don't want that, and save, but you get the idea. Note that if you use the volume increase or decrease switches on your MFC 101, the volume that's changing is actually this main level slider in this output block. And therefore it's only changing in this particular scene. And of course you know that either using the volume increase or decrease switches will instantly save that preset as well. So just keep that in mind. After all of those examples of what scenes can do, it's important to note that scenes cannot change parameters within blocks. As I showed you, we could change the engage or bypass state of any block, the XY state of any block that has XY switching, and we can also change that main level in the output block. But what I can't do is change the gain of my amp here. Let's look at this from, say, 1.42 in scene 1 and then change it to 5.5 in scene 2. Again, scenes don't change parameters within any blocks. If I were to change that gain or the output level or the type of amp or any parameter in any other block, you are instantly changing that in every other scene. So let me show you this real quick. So if I have it at 1.2 right here, this input drive in scene 1, let's go to scene 2 and change it to 4, for example. And I can even save it, doesn't matter, but I'll change it to 4. When I go back to scene 1, it's also 4. Any change done within a block affects all scenes. So again, scenes do not save changes within blocks. To accomplish this, you can use something called scene controllers. I have a video that shows you how to use those, but basically you can think of them like internal expression pedals or switches that engage when you change scenes. So using a scene controller, I could attach that modifier to this, so changing scenes will change this value, but it doesn't happen automatically. You need to set up that scene controller. Check out my video if you're interested in that. So there we have it. We now know the difference among presets, XY switching, and scenes. So how can we use these together, and when is one better than the others? The way I see it, presets are the base level of everything in the Axe effects. They are the easiest, most straightforward way to create tones because it's easy to see what is doing what. You aren't doing hidden things with XY switching or changing things around with scenes. If you are new to the Axe effects or even digital gear in general, I highly suggest you stick with presets at least for a while until you really understand how they work or until you start running into some of the problems I illustrated earlier. For many, it's difficult to grasp the preset within a preset concept using XY switching or scenes, so presets just make the most sense. Different sounds are different presets. That's it. Simple. Using presets also helps with using Other Midi Gear because each preset change sends a MIDI PC command or a program change. Almost all MIDI-enabled gear responds to these PC commands, so by changing a preset on the Axe effects, you can also change presets on Other Midi Gear at the same time. This keeps everything in sync with different sounds or different songs. Another benefit of presets is that you can name each preset. Right now, you can't give titles to X or Y in blocks, and you can't give titles to scenes. With presets, each change will pull up a different title that can describe the sound you have set up, and it may be easier to play complex songs with lots of tone changes because of this. So this preset we named Clean and Lead to let me know what's going on in here. I have another one called 59 Bass Guy that clues me into that's what that amp is. I have this one called Basic X32 that tells me this is my basic preset for use with my X32 rack. And you can name your presets to be whatever you want. Moving on to XY switching, it kind of has a limited use on its own, and it's best used in combination with presets and scenes. However, XY allows us to store two independent settings of certain blocks, and we can recall either one at any time. As I mentioned before, this is great when you want to keep the overall sound of a preset the same, but just trade out one component like changing the amp from clean to lead, or changing a delay from quarter notes to dotted eighths, or the style of reverb, that sort of thing. A drawback to this though is that each block has its own XY toggle MIDI command, so a foot switch would need 3 switches just for XY switching the amp, delay, and reverb, and that's probably in addition to the engage bypass switch for those 3 blocks. So that's 6 switches used up on your foot controller right there. As I mentioned before, you could try to make a single switch do XY switching for multiple blocks, but that limits you since you can never switch those independently because they are all linked together. So again, that brings us back to scenes. Being able to engage and bypass blocks and choose the XY state of blocks really increases what we can do within a single preset. This leaves more presets available for us to use in the future. With 8 scenes, we can have 8 different tones as long as all the blocks we need are already in the preset. Many people use scenes to change their amp sounds so they can get gapless switching. When you change presets, there is a little gap in the audio because the axe needs to load about 1 million different parameters. Okay, that was just a guess, but it seems like 1 million to me. If there was no gap programmed, there would be a pop or a click noise due to the way that digital audio works. So let's hear what that sounds like. I'm gonna pause Axe Edit and use my MFC, which you can't see, just to change presets. So here we go, this preset. You can hear a little gap in between those, and for a lot of people that gap really isn't noticeable or doesn't bother them, but some people need instant gapless switching. However, using scenes, we can simply bypass amp block 1 and engage amp block 2. No parameters are changing internally, we're just muting and unmuting a couple of blocks. So now there is gapless switching between these 2 scenes, because again, nothing's loading, it's just muting or unmuting. For solo performers or bands with a single guitarist, this can be a very important feature. However, this gapless switch only happens when the amps are ready to go in the scenes and are actively loaded in both scenes. If I switch from X to Y with any amp from a scene to a scene, there will be a gap because the amp block requires that time to load without making those pops and clicks. So if you want gapless switching, you need to go from amp 1 to amp 2 or amp 2 to amp 1. Again, amp 1X to amp 1Y won't be gapless. But additionally, if you're going from amp 1X in scene 1 to amp 2Y in scene 2, you need to make sure that amp 2Y is loaded in scene 1. Even if it's bypassed, it has to be ready to go. Again, that's so nothing needs to load. If amp 2X is loaded in scene 1, it's still going to switch from X to Y when you change scenes, and you'll get that gap. So let me show you that. I'm going to pause Axe Edit because it does add a gap since it needs to communicate over the USB. So we're going to use our front panel, and again, I have my MFC controller here. You don't need to see it, but I'll tell you what I'm doing. Here we are in scene 1, and we have amp 1X, and we have amp 2X as well. This is amp 2X, it's just bypassed. Like I said in my example, we want to switch from amp 1X to amp 2Y. And we want that to be gapless. For some reason, we want that switch. Now I happen to have that ready in scene 4. But again, right now amp 2X is loaded. If I switch to scene 4, which has amp 2Y ready to go, let's hear what that sounds like. Let's try that again so you can hear it. You hear that little gap of audio there. If we do want to go from scene 1 to scene 4 with gapless switching, we need to make sure in scene 1 that our amp 2Y is selected. Here we go, it's still bypassed, but we now selected Y. Let me save that. So now if you just focus your eyes on the amp 2 block here, I'm going to switch scenes using Axe Edit, scene 1 to scene 4. You can see that nothing changed there, it's just Y was ready to go, it just unmuted. So let's hear what that sounds like now that we have it set up correctly. Let's hear that again. you can hear that it changed immediately and it was gapless. So make sure you plan your gapless switching correctly. You might want to use presets to help you create more pairs of gapless switching amps. Just change your presets at times in the music where you can wait a few milliseconds for the preset to load. Another reason people use scenes is for proper spillover. As I mentioned before, spillover is the concept of delay and reverb trails continuing when you change presets. So the delay sound from your lead tone continues to trail a bit even after you switch to and are playing your clean tone. This is definitely a cool effect, but sometimes the delay trails will fade out so quickly that it might not even be noticed. So this is one for you to decide how important it is for you. There is a way to handle spillover when changing presets, but it has been difficult to use for a lot of people because you need exact copies of the delay block in each preset and a few other specifics. With scenes, since we are mostly engaging and bypassing blocks, the delay or reverb trails naturally continue because we just bypassed the delay block, for example. To make this happen, make sure you set the bypass mode to either mute effects in or mute effects out on your delay and reverb blocks. If you set it to mute or through, the delay trails will immediately stop. Mute effects in or mute effects out only affects the effect of the block, and it also acts like a dry through. Mute effects in means if you play while the block is bypassed, the delay or reverb effect will not hear your guitar, and if you suddenly engage the block, there won't be any effect since it didn't hear the input. So let's see what that sounds like. I'm gonna play my guitar and I'm gonna engage the block and stop playing my guitar immediately so we can see if there are any trails. Here we go. So anything I played before the delay block was engaged, it didn't hear it, so there won't be any trails. Now let's change it to mute effects out. Mute effects out means that the effect is hearing your guitar, and if you suddenly engage the block, you'll hear delay or reverb. So let's see what that sounds like. Same thing, gonna play and then engage the block and stop playing at the same time. There you go, it was a little subtle. Let me see if I can do that again. Cool, so you could hear whatever I played before the block was engaged, it was listening to it the whole time, and when I did engage that, it started doing the delays. So that's up to you to decide, but you have to choose at least between mute effects in or mute effects out. So let's see how this affects our spillover. I'm gonna go from scene 4, which is my lead tone with delay block, and then I'm gonna switch to scene 1, which is my clean tone without any effects on it. So let's hear that. Here's scene 4. You could hear that the delay trails were still going even though I switched to my clean scene and I was playing as well. So this effect can be subtle. It depends how you arrange the delay and everything, but a lot of people really like having this spillover using scenes. One drawback for using scenes is that you can't name scenes at this time. And this may change in the future with the firmware update, but for now, they're always scene 1, 2, 3, and so on. Some ways to get around this is to name your preset that gives a clue to what the scenes do. So we might name this preset S1 through 3 clean and S4 and 5 lead. And hit enter and save that. But remember to make sure that this title fits on your foot controller display. I believe the MFC 101 doesn't show as many characters as the AxeFX display or AxeEdit. Another way to get around this is to have a similar workflow for your scenes. So one way to do this is to have scenes that always progress from clean to more distorted or louder. So like a clean to rhythm to lead tones. So you could have scene 1 clean, scene 2 clean with effects, scene 3 light distortion, scene 4 heavy distortion, and scene 5 lead. You could continue that pattern with all the different presets you do, or at least, go from clean to more dirty. You could also do scenes in the order that they come up in your songs. So the intro is always scene 1, and verse is scene 2, chorus is scene 3, bridge is scene 4, and so on. You just have to think of something that works for you and that makes the most sense for your music situation. Another drawback to scenes is that with so much going on within the preset, with XY switching and not always seeing all the blocks and settings available in the layout, scenes can be very confusing. It's very easy to select the wrong amp block and be adjusting that output level or gain or something, and you wonder why nothing's changing, And you might be doing it so quickly that you even save or store the preset without realizing this, and you actually adjusted your other amp and you kind of messed it up for you. I don't know how many times, even during this demo, I had amp 2 selected and I was changing something thinking it was amp 1. I'm like, how come this isn't changing? So just be aware of the increased complexity when you're using scenes like this. If this is way too confusing, you might want to just stick with presets and use scenes only to engage or bypass groups of blocks. Like I said before, just because it can do it doesn't mean you have to use that feature. If you can just change presets for different sounds and editing presets is easier for you than doing scenes, you don't need to force yourself to use scenes only to get the same outcome. But of course, the trade-off for being more confusing is having more options. A popular way to use scenes has been a 4 amp preset. The Axe-Fx 2 allows 2 amp blocks in a single preset, and each amp block has an X and Y state. So that's 4 independent sets of amp parameters available to us. To set this up, we can shunt from our input to our output. And I'm just going to add our cab first here, just because. So there's our cab block. And let's choose a 412 something or other. There we go. Now let's add our first amp. Right click, choose amp 1. Now the most important setting when doing the 4 amp method is this bypass mode parameter. Here it is in Axe Edit. And on the front panel, it's usually on the last page, and it's the last control, bypass mode. You want to make sure that this is set to mute and not through. If it's set to through, when we bypass the amp block, there will be a dry tone sent through the signal path. We don't want that, so set it to mute. Let's make a quick Y setting. We'll switch to Y, and we can see the bypass mode again defaults to through. So for our Y side, we need to change that to mute as well. And let's just change this to another random amp. Let's do a Brit. Here we go. Now we're going to add a second amp block, and you want to make this block parallel to the first amp block. You don't want it in series, you don't want it in line, since we'll be using the mute bypass feature. So I usually put it under my first amp block. You can put it above if you want, but I think most people usually put it under. So we'll right click and add amp block 2. So there it is, but it's not connected to our grid at all. It's not going to affect anything. We need to connect it diagonally. So from the shunt or block before it, we're going to click and make a connection diagonally here. And we're also going to click here and make a connection diagonally back up, just so we can share the same cab. Now here we have both amp blocks on. You usually don't want that for this method. Again, we want 4 separate amps, 4 different amps. So I'm going to go ahead and bypass our first amp by double clicking on it. And let's make our settings real quick for our second amp. Let's choose a Dirty Shirley and we'll set the bypass mode to mute. We'll go to our Y state of amp block 2, and I don't know, let's choose a Jazz 120. That looks good. And again, we need to set our bypass mode to mute. Let's call this 4 amps, hit enter, and we'll save. And now we can set up the scenes how we want. So let's say scene 1 will be amp 1X, scene 2 will be amp 1Y, scene 3 will be amp 2X, and scene 4 will be amp 2Y. So let's go. We're in scene 1. Let's bypass this guy, and we'll set this and engage it. And here we go, amp 1X. That's scene 1. In scene 2, we wanted amp 1Y, so we'll bypass amp 2 and switch amp 1 to Y. And in scene 3, we wanted amp 2X. So there it is, amp 2 and X. And in scene 4, we wanted amp 2Y. So we'll bypass amp 1 and click Y, and there we go. Let's save that, and here we go. Let's just click through it. We're not going to play, but scene 1, amp 1X, scene 2, amp 1Y, scene 3, amp 2X, so amp 1 is bypassed, and scene 4, amp 2Y. Of course, we can add other blocks and effects and have them turn on and off with the different scenes as well. But that's just a quick example of this 4 amp setup that has been really popular. Remember, set that bypass mode to mute. That's the most important part. Let me show you my main preset that's always a work in progress. Here's my basic preset, and I use 4 amps like I showed you before for different tones, and I have a bunch of effects for my electric guitar. I use 5 scenes in this preset for my electric sound, and let me run through them real quick just to give you an idea of what this sounds like. In scene 1, I have a basic dry clean tone with no effects. In scene 2, I have a chorus clean sort of thing going on, and sometimes I have this long reverb on, sometimes I turn it off. Scene 3 is more of a classic rock tone. I'm using the FAS Wrecker amp right now. Have a bit of delay back there. Scene 4 is usually my heavy rhythm tone, so a little bit more metal or something like that, depends on the song. And you can see in this scene I'm using amp 2 here. Scene 5 is usually my big lead tone, so a high gain lead tone, and I usually have some sort of delay, and in this iteration I have a tremolo only on the delay, so let's hear what that sounds like. And those are my electric sounds. I use a guitar with 2 outputs, and down here on row 4 I have another row for my piezo signal, which is an acoustic sound, and it comes through the input. I use volume blocks to split my input so it can only hear the electric pickups or just the acoustic pickups. It goes through all of this, and I have my acoustic join the main row here so it can use the filter for a boost and also use the looper block. So here's what the acoustic sounds like. What's cool about this setup is I can use both at the same time, and I usually use scene 2 with my clean chorus effect on my electric guitar, and then I mix in the piezo signal to hear it. So here's I'm gonna start with the electric, and then I'm gonna roll up the volume on my acoustic till it sounds like what I want it to sound like. So that's always fun, and you can see here in the middle I have this crazy thing going on with the feedback send and return blocks, also the effects loop and a delay, and I use this little thing to add effects to my vocal mics that I'm running through my mixer. So I'm basically using the Axe-Fx as an insert for vocal effects. So I have a ton of stuff going on in this preset, and personally I don't want to change presets because I don't want the acoustic and vocal paths to have gaps and change. And I also have external MIDI gear hooked up to my Axe-Fx. I use presets on that external gear for different song settings. So I don't want to change tones on my Axe-Fx with presets because that would send a program change to that other external gear and would change that preset too. I need to use scenes to change my tones within a song. And what I do is I build different presets on the Axe-Fx with different effects or sounds that correspond to a particular song. The same way I use the external MIDI gear its presets with specific songs in mind. So when I change presets on my Axe-Fx, I go from preset 1 for this song, and it's preset 1 on the external rack. And when I change to preset 2, it's another song, and it's another set of effects in the Axe-Fx, and it's another set of effects on that external rack gear as well. And again, within that song, I can have up to 8 different tones with the Axe-Fx without sending that PC message that affects my other gear. So this is a bit of a complex setup, and it wouldn't be possible without XY switching and scenes. But of course, all of this is housed within presets. So in this video, I've shared with you a ton of information. XY switching and scenes added so many features and possibilities to the Axe-Fx 2, but the level of complexity also increased. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty simple. You just have to remember the layers of features. Presets are the basic level, then XY switching can change a few things, and then scenes can do a whole lot more. If you're just starting out with the Axe-Fx, again, I say maybe just stick with presets. It's easier to see what's going on in each preset, and it's more straightforward to set up. If you want to start getting a little more involved, you can start using XY on 1 or 2 blocks, just to get used to having different things change in the preset, not being able to see it, that sort of thing. Like switching that amp from clean to lead, or changing the delay type, all using the same preset and saving CPU. After you're familiar with programming different presets for sounds, maybe you can venture into scenes. Start simple at first. Maybe just use scenes to engage or bypass a group of blocks at the same time, like I showed you before. Then when you're ready, you can explore using scenes to make presets within presets, as some people call it, using 2 amp blocks and the XY switching for 4 different amps available as I showed you in my preset. I hope this video helped you understand the concept behind presets, XY switching, and scenes. So now you can get out there and have fun making all of your tones.